Welcome, everyone, to Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success, your weekly podcast for software sales professionals who want to sell better. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, make Software Sales Simplified your home for insights, developments, and the latest in the world of enterprise software sales. I'm Kevin Donville, and I'm joined by my good friend Matt Long, and together we have over 50 years experience in enterprise software selling and implementation. We're happy you've joined us here today to talk to industry experts, share opinions, and become better sellers together. But before we do that, please take a moment to allow me to remind you, like, follow, subscribe, comment on whatever platform it is you're listening to us here today. Really helps out the algorithm, really helps out the channel, and it costs you nothing. But before we go get into today's topic, I really wanted to kind of take a moment to say hello to my good friend, Matt. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Kevin. Thank you.
So, it's interesting. We've got our methodology, with the MOVE methodology, which has a couple of pillars on it. And MOVE and engagement definitely came up with respect to today's topic and the guest we're going to be speaking with. I need to ask you a question. So why do you think so many sales organizations stay busy, but they still fail to scale predictably?
Well, I think it's the same as in life, right? You can stay busy doing a lot of things, but are you doing the right things, right? What are the things that are most effective and the best use of your time? And this is something we struggle with all the time. If we're running a business or just, running your household or dealing with your kids or whatever, we only have so much time in the day.
Yeah.
It's very easy to focus on the wrong things. And by taking a step back and thinking about what's going to move the needle the most, I think that's where you get to scale more predictably.
Too right. And to help us explore that topic today, we have a good friend coming on to the show, the gentleman by the name of Mark Krebs. Mark, I've had the pleasure of working with you. Matt's had the pleasure of working in the periphery of you in the past as well. But for those of our visitors who are watching the show, maybe who don't know you, take a moment, take the floor, tell everybody who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I've watched quite a few of your guys' podcasts and am honored to be even thought of to be included with the esteemed people that you've invited previously. I think you've made it.
Well, we're honored that you watched the show, quite frankly. That's high praise as far as I'm concerned.
So my background, it's a bit sketchy and probably very different compared to the majority of people that you've had on your show before. I've had a very roundabout way of getting to where I am. When I was in college, growing up, my dad was a dentist, and I had no idea what I wanted to do when I would grow up. And so he said, if you don't know, go into accounting because you can always use it. And he wasn't wrong. Like, it's pretty good advice, actually. So out of school, I got my CPA and worked for Arthur Andersen for a couple of years. Learned quite a bit about business, and also realized I don't really like accounting. So I went to go work for one of their clients, which is some guys who'd started Boston Chicken and Einstein Bagels, and they were starting a brand new microbrewery concept back when microbreweries were like exploding. And the idea was, we'll open one, prove it works, and then go open up 100. And we opened up one, and I realized lots of things that you don't do when starting a company. But I got the bug in my head, and I think there's there's something wrong with folks that like startups, but I got it in my brain, and it's been sticking with startups and trying to come up with new concepts the rest of my career. So if somehow following that, I ended up crossing some paths with some guys who were starting a cigar company. So we manufactured our own line of cigars, opened up retail locations all around the country. The damn thing was like starting to work. And then on the cover of Barron's magazine back in the day, there was a picture of a smiley face with a cigar that was blowing up. And it said, scientists have come out and realized smoking one cigar is equivalent to smoking 100 cigarettes. And we realized this was not a business we wanted to be in much longer. So we sold our business, sold our inventory, and got out. And then that's when I started down my path in software. It was back in 2000 when everybody was starting software companies, and you could raise money by writing a business plan on the back of a napkin. And I joined up with the guys that, with the company that eventually became OpinionLab. I wrote our business plan, did all the financial projections, went out and raised, I think it was around $7 million at the time, which again, sounds impressive, but it wasn't really back in the day. Anybody could have done that. But we actually made a go of it. Like the damn thing worked. And I got into and excited and addicted to kind of this whole software world. So it's been pretty fun. I've done odd things since then, started a liquor company, took a year off and traveled the world and did a bunch of weird stuff, but find myself back in the software world again. I work for a company called Celebrus, which most people have never heard of, but it's been around for 20 years. It is publicly traded. We work with like the largest companies on earth, but no one's ever heard of us. So that's my job, is to get a lot of people to hear of us. But anyways, it's cool. It's been fun.
That's interesting. I mean, a few things there I didn't know about you. The cigar thing, never heard that one. Was brand new. But and the whole walking the earth one, I remember when we had that conversation when you started that journey. I remember that a lot, and I was in both awe and remarkably jealous the fact that you had the opportunity to do that. But that's a very eclectic and interesting background, because starting with accounting, I understand that. My significant other is an accountant, so I understand how that works and the stability that affords. But then you go to this whole thing about starting businesses and the turmoil and the stress that can bring on, and the rewards. So how has that shaped your view? So now you've been a CRO, you've been leading organizations to drive revenue, and you're back in the saddle again. How has that changed your view of the role and what you expect people to be bringing to it if they want to be successful?
Yeah, it's interesting. Starting companies, being involved in startups, especially multiple startups, definitely makes you dead on the inside, because you realize it is soul crushing. And it's really funny, like, because I'm the first to admit, what do they say? The average entrepreneur fails 9 times before they hit it big. I'm at like 7, so I still got two more to go, but I don't know if I've got it in me. It's funny because if and when they invariably don't work, because a lot of them don't, you looking back on it, going through it, it is really, really hard. And it crushes you. But then you look back, you're done, you take a month or 2 off and you kind of reflect. And it is unbelievable how you only remember the fun part of starting a company. And the first thing you want to do is go start another one, because they're just unbelievably fun. But it's hard. And it makes you reflect and think about, because you always do a post-mortem. I've been in companies, and everybody knows this story, like the world has to align in order for you to get lucky, which is at the end of the day is kind of the most important thing. But you could have the right idea, the right people, and it's just the wrong time. I've been involved where it's the right idea, the right product, and you have the wrong person on the team in a key role, and it just kind of screws things up. My last venture, it was one of the first ones where it should have worked. Like every single thing about it worked. And the variable I hadn't considered was the industry. We started a liquor company, a spirits business, grew very, very fast, started to expand around the country, and it was working. It absolutely worked. And we went out, we raised $1 million, and then quickly realized in the liquor industry that wasn't even close enough to what we should have raised. Because in software, if you have a good idea and a good product, you have a right to win. And there's usually a way to work your way into winning. And if you're really, really good, somebody will probably buy you. In liquor, it is very much a pay-to-play industry. Like you have to have money, and you have to pay to get on people's shelves, and you have to pay to get placement. And it's just it's a totally different world. I didn't think that coming from software. I'm like, we got a great product. People love it. Everywhere we go, the thing explodes. And we did not raise enough money to play the game, I guess you could say. Anyways, it's quite interesting.
That's an interesting perspective there. So like you come out talking about how much of a slog it is to start companies, but yet how addictive it is to get into that process of trying to build organizations and build companies, and just that chasing of the idea and the dream and trying to chase success from that perspective. But you're very candid about the fact that you've made some serious mistakes along the way. Now, you've worked with folks before as a founder yourself. You've walked the walk and talked the talk, so you know what that role requires. Sometimes there's founders that'll reach out, like working with us or working with you in the past. They ask for advice, but then when you give them, you do the analysis and come back and say, here's what's broken, here's what you got to go fix. They push back and they're not ready to do that. Why do you think that is? What do you think? What do you think's at play there with respect to that?
It's a really good question. And I'm sure there's different ways to think about it, but how I kind of see the world in my experience in startups is you kind of have the type of founder that's really good from 0 to 10, 0 million, zero, starting from nothing to, let's say 10 million, 10, 20 million, whatever the number is. And then to be honest, it usually is a different kind of person that takes you from 10 to 100 and then, or 100 plus. I find that the ones that are from 0 to 10 oftentimes maybe don't want advice or don't think they need advice because they're so head down. They've actually started something from scratch. It's starting to work. They start to realize that there might be cracks or there might be problems, but they feel like they can just muscle through. And they feel like, hey, my gut got me this far and I'm going to push. And where I've seen it, and it's happened in my experiences, where it starts to break is whatever your ceiling happens to be. If you're a 0 to 10 guy, as you start getting to 8, 9, 10, when they need people's help, they need to listen to advice. They need somebody to tell them, you've done a great job, but here's a different direction you have to take it in order to succeed. Oftentimes that's when they don't listen. And that's oftentimes when they hit that ceiling and either recognize, some are smart enough to recognize, hey, I'm not the 10 to 100 million guy and I got to bring people in to help me, and are okay with that. And a lot of founders, I mean, it's their baby. It's hard for them to walk away, and they get to the 8 to 10 range and they just kind of hang out there. And then, either survive and just kind of languish, or sometimes just doesn't work out. That's at least
a couple of thresholds, right? Yeah, no. I hear what you're saying. I mean, there's a couple of little thresholds, like leaping points, that gaps that people need to be able to cross, not only in organizations relative to their product and the industry, but to your point, leadership and people and their sweet spot about what they can contribute. And it sounds to me like there's just as much psychology going on at work internal to the organization and the people who are leading it as there are, when you're out there trying to sell the product that they're trying to work with, But it's not just the leaders, like at the top, like the C-level people with respect to the CEO and so forth, but it's also like the sales leaders themselves. The CROs kind of get caught in that trap too, don't they?
No question about it. And I've been caught in that trap in the past where, it's this weird, and maybe I default to this, and maybe this is my excuse for all of the failures in my life. But you see it a lot where from 0 to 10, you're head down, making mistakes quickly, trying to fix those mistakes, honestly, hoping you've got payroll to be able to have money to make payroll in 2 weeks before you've spent all the money that you've raised. Like, I mean, it is a stress level like no other. But you're head down and you figure out how to sell a product. You start teaching other people how to sell a product, and you're running. You fall into this pattern where you don't take a step back and start doing a lot of the stuff that you guys talk about, which is creating processes and documenting and creating training programs, because you just don't have time. But the fact is, in the beginning, you probably don't have time because you're just trying to stay alive. But when you get to whatever your ceiling is, if you don't have that in place, then from a sales perspective, you're screwed. Like, you can't scale. You can go from 0 to 10, you can kind of get there. From 10 to 100, you cannot without having structure. And that's what I think a lot of folks who haven't been through the process in the past. And again, I view the world from kind of little to medium, not medium to billion. I'm not that guy, but from the little perspective, that's like, keep your eye on the ball of, at someday you have to document what's working.
I know that you started, OpinionLab. I think that's where we first met, one of the founders there. And I'm not sure if it defined the voice of customer space, but it was one of the first, certainly, in that space, right?
Yeah.
So, as that market is maturing and people are starting to understand what you do, I mean, that's a journey in itself. Now, it's interesting you're talking about Celebrus now. Like, no one knows what you do or whatever.
Right. Right.
It looks like it's kind of like data on digital identity. I'm not exactly
Yeah.
sure. You could probably explain it in a little bit, but how different is it as you're growing? Because that's a challenge of any startup is, do they know what we do? How are we defining and creating a space or a solution or, or something for that? And then when you hit that level where you understood, how does that change your focus in terms of how you attack opportunities or going after new leads and prospecting? Can you talk a little bit about that journey and kind of how it compares to
Yeah.
now? Yeah.
I vividly remember when we were first starting OpinionLab, and you're right, it was voice of customer. There was, Foresee and I Perceptions. I think the kind of the three of us played in that space, bringing up old names. Um, I remember vividly on calls whenever we were doing sales, and it was the internet, right? So people didn't even know what the hell that was, let alone that I'm trying to capture feedback on your site. And it's funny because everybody would buy, whether it was Omniture or Web Trends or Core Metrics or whatever kind of stuff. And they like, okay, I know what people are doing on my site. We would call in and say, we can capture feedback, let people talk to you. And they would say, well, why do I care what people think? And I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, listen to the words you just said. That's just insane. But it was a lot of missionary work. And I think that's true in any startup. I mean, I work for a publicly traded company that's got, biggest clients in the world. And historically it had been sold through partners. And so it grew into a really decent sized business with an incredible product, but no one ever, it was never public. It was never known in the market. So it's the same challenge. It's kind of like, even though I'm working for a big company, it's a lot of missionary work. It's always the old adage, it's always better to be second because the first has to kind of blaze the path and figure out how and do all of the communication and all of the, I remember back in the day at OpinionLab, it was just kind of like, I think the first really big company that we sold, because we were on Chiquita Banana. We were on MVP.com. I don't know if you remember that when, John Elway and Michael Jordan started the sports brand. We were on a handful of kind of just random sites. We sold into American Express. That was my first big client that I ever sold. And of course, immediately they asked about our infrastructure and security, which we had none. And so we had to go spend $100,000 just to build stuff to be able to meet their requirements. But it was the first one where we were like, they get it. And if they get it, then immediately other people are going to get it. Because as soon as you start being able to say to somebody, oh, by the way, one of our clients is American Express, then it immediately starts to grow. But anyways, back to your original question, it is depending on the situation, the challenge, and I think it's just very interesting to me, the challenge, it's an established company with an established product, but you're selling into an established market. So one challenge is if you have something that no one's ever heard of and you're trying to kind of blaze a path into something that's new, that's the missionary work. The challenge that us and lots of companies face is you're selling into a very mature market. You never get fired for hiring IBM, right? The old adage. So you go and try and sell against established players like an Adobe or a Google or these really big companies. And it's almost equally as difficult, right? You have to convince somebody to do something different. And that can be really challenging as well. So yeah, as a sales leader, as a founder, as a owner of a company, like trying to understand what your challenge is, because you're going to have one, whatever the challenge is, figuring out what it is and figuring out how the hell to kind of overcome those objections and kind of work your way through it.
Yeah, Kevin and I both got our start in software sales back in the late 90s with a collaborative knowledge management platform.
Okay.
Whatever the hell that is, right? So, but actually, one of our founders, Tom Gruber, went on to found Siri. Okay, he was brilliant, brilliant man. We've talked about him before, but this was a evangelical sell for sure, right?
Yeah.
What does that even mean? What are you doing? And
Right.
so there's so many times you're trying to position against something that exists, but then tell how it's different. But you're trying to find that inroad to that conversation. I do think, though, having that missionary or evangelical sell does sharpen your skills a lot, because you have to be very curious. You have to really understand what is the pain the customer's having, right? As opposed to a prepackaged solution that solves a very specific problem. You just kind of walk in and say, "Oh, we got it. Here you go." But
Right.
I think even in those situations, taking the time to really be curious about the customer
Yeah.
and what else they care about. So I think there's a lot of advantages there to
I agree.
having that. And that probably, I'm imagining from all your endeavors, right? Trying to really understand the fit for this.
Yeah.
People like cigars, but what's the approach to that thing? Or people like
Well, right.
liquor?
Right. Yeah, it's true. And it's like, the whole idea of at least how I look at sales. And, I wasn't a salesperson. I was an accountant and I was working for OpinionLab, and they're like, well, you have to do everything because we only have like 6 people here. So you have to sell and you have to go figure out our financial forecasts to make sure and set up our accounting system and whatever. Wear a lot of hats. It's another fun thing. If you have the right mental problems to like startups, it's fun to wear a lot of hats. But that was one of the first things that I learned, or that I enjoyed, and I think is a good trait in any salesperson, is to be a really good storyteller and be very, very inquisitive. Anytime you're in a sales conversation, if you're talking more than the other person, then you're probably not doing the right job. Like, you want to hear what they have to say and what their pain points are, and genuinely care that, hey, what I've got can actually solve your problems, or have the honest conversation and say, you know what, I don't think it's a fit. And that's okay. Like, it's okay to be honest with folks, and people generally react positively to that. Because if they're not going to buy from you at whatever company they're at today, someday they probably will be in a position where they might be interested.
And how does
Yep.
storytelling differ than sales theater, if you will?
That was
Yeah.
exactly what I was about to ask.
Yeah. So sales theater to me is kind of interesting, and this is, I think, what a lot of people fall into, right? If you're not good at storytelling and creating engagement and uh, identifying if a deal really is there or not, then you become really good at putting things into the CRM. You get really good at doing lots of demos and having lots of meetings and basically creating cool dashboards of your activity, but it doesn't net into results. And I've always said, it's probably not the right thing to say, but I've always said, if, any sales guys that's ever worked for me, if they work 2 hours a day, I don't care. Like, I don't care. They're hitting their numbers. At the end of the day, the only metric, sales is really interesting. I've said this to a lot of people. Like, it's hard to fire an accountant because it takes a long time to figure out that they're a bad accountant. With a salesperson, it's a scorecard. It's the only job, I think, on earth that has a scorecard. And so you're either hitting your number or you're not. And so that's frankly the only metric that works. You fall back on looking at behavioral metrics to understand what is it that you're doing? Why is it that you're successful? And I think oftentimes as sales leaders, you fall into the trap of spending maybe more time than you should trying to fix that behavior. Because I kind of think either people get it or they don't. They're either good at sales or they're not. Not to say you can't train people to be good at sales and put them in a process where they flourish and they're good at it. But at the end of the day, I kind of think people are either really good at telling stories or they're not. And it's kind of, finding those people and putting them in a position to be successful.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. One of the things I like to say is that, especially when it comes to things like discovery, which is where it all starts, right? Whether or not you're going to be solving the right problem, people have to be curious. I
Correct.
can't train you to be curious, but I can
Correct.
train you in a process that will simulate you being curious.
Yeah.
So I can get you kind of close to that. And then you have a reasonable chance of being able to execute and be successful. Now that's interesting to understand what sales theater looks like from the perspective of like looking down from the top. But if you're in the field, if you're one of the sellers in that organization, uh, actually, this is a two-part question. If you're a seller in that organization, what are some of the red flags to let you know you're in an organization that is subjecting itself to sales theater? And second half of that question, if you're a sales leader, what do you need to watch out for yourself
Yeah.
that will tell you, oh my gosh, I'm slipping into the trap of sales theater?
Yeah. I think if you're in an organization where the singular focus is, what did you do today? What were your metrics? How many calls did you make? Like, kind of getting into the minutia,
Mm.
it's a red flag, right? because that's at the end of the day, you should be focusing, as we've been discussing, you should be focusing on, are deals moving through the funnel? Where are your conversations, pulling other people in to help move a deal forward? Yeah, it gets hairy if you're working for an organization where it is micromanagement isn't the right word, but it is the right word, right? You're kind of you're trying to elicit behavior from somebody by holding them accountable, when you would hope that the people that you have that you're working for and the people you're working with are mature enough and capable enough of being able to do it themselves. As a leader, like I have questions. Like I'll say, hey, look, deals aren't moving and you don't have a ton of deals. So what are you doing all day? Like, so I want to know if that's not there, fill in the blank. Like, tell me what else is it that you're doing? And maybe you're doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing. You're working on stuff that isn't going to put you in a position to be successful. And that's on me to help you identify that. There's a role, there's a place for metrics and measurement. But if that's what you're primarily focused on, that doesn't lead to success in a sales team. From a sales leader's perspective, it's basically the exact same thing. If I find myself having the conversation every day, what did you do today? Then I don't have the right salespeople. Like I shouldn't have to have that conversation.
Yeah. I used to have a mentor that used to refer to that as majoring in the minor.
Yeah.
Right. And occasionally you have to pull minor, and Matt can tell you, he occasionally has to do it to me too, even to this day, which is like, Kevin, you're getting too hyper focused on stuff that is minutia that really doesn't move the needle. I know you're curious, it's interesting, but you need to, lift the nose of the plane up. You're heading into the Alps, that sort of thing. Yeah. But, I can understand if you're majoring in the minor and you've taken your eye off the ball of things that really move the deals, you're going to run into some failure. And I've seen organizations, and you've explained just some of the struggles that you've had just here at the beginning of the show about how, people don't give up and they keep knuckling under, but yet they're not focusing on the right things. When do you know that, just hard work is not necessarily the right thing?
I love that question. It's a great question. And it defers back to, and I think it's this word. And again, I have a very narrow view of the world, right? Because I play in the small space. I'm a 0 to 10 guy, sometimes a 10 to 20 guy, but like I'm happy to hand it over to somebody that's a 10 to 20 to 100. That it's just different. It's a different skill set. I like the little stuff. That question is fantastic because when you're in a startup, you kind of almost have to win by grit because it is hard and you have to try harder than anybody else, like to convince somebody to take a chance. I mean, in a startup, most of the time you're telling stories and doing a puppet show and hoping that whatever the hell you sold, the product guys can actually build and deliver and then you have a handful of clients you can actually reference. And it's like, it literally is just a grind. But if you can find people that go along for that ride, the grind gets you pretty far. Like it gets you from whatever it is, 0 to 5 or whatever the number is, but it only goes so far. If whatever that number is, and again, I kind of keep playing in that 0 to 10 space or whatever, as you get kind of towards whatever your ceiling is, the grind runs out. First of all, you run out of energy. People can't keep that up. You start losing the folks because they're like, I just can't do this anymore. And honestly, the hard work only gets you so far that even your superstars, your North Star sales folks that you're pointing everybody else at, they start running out of steam too. Like they just, or not even just running out of steam, they run out of success. Like you can only go so far with that. And that's kind of what I was mentioning before. The thought process that I had to learn over the years was that I don't care how small you are, process matters. And you can get pretty far with grit and hard work and determination, but it's going to run out. And if you don't have the process and the training and the systems in place to onboard more people, because invariably you're not going to have all superstars, you're going to have people across the spectrum. Process is the only thing that can get you to your ceiling and through your ceiling. Right. And that's hard, to be honest, for a lot of founders. I've struggled with that in the past because I didn't know. I'm like, we're winning, we're doing great, things are great. And then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I got to hire 3 more people. How am I going to train those 3 people? Because that guy just left. And you're just kind of stuck holding the bag.
Yeah, just play devil's advocate for a bit. As you're scaling, I think that's the quandary everyone has. It's like, you need to start creating some process, some structure, some regular metrics, because you can't spend all that focus that you did before. You're trying to ramp a wide team of people. Not
Yeah.
everyone is as skilled as maybe some of your early AEs, right?
Right.
And you're trying to train the next level about how to be effective, right? And so I think that's where I think a lot of leaders struggle. I've seen this a couple times now where, they're trying to ramp sales. They hire all these people. They hire mid-level managers as well. And everyone's kind of this thing, but then it turns into, what are we even doing here, right? So
Right.
I think that's always the key. And are there any? I mean, you've talked about a little bit, but are there any specific metrics that you do hold to, regardless of kind of where you are in that growth phase, that you think are just really critical for you to understand or to dive into?
So metrics, you mean how? Like metrics on?
Well, if you're measuring your AEs or things like that and figuring out which ones I want to talk to, or which ones I
Right.
need coaching, or which one,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah. It's hard and it's different. There are metrics. And I'm just trying to think because I think it's different in every business that I've been in. On the software side of things, it's a little bit just because it's not a complete startup in a totally weird industry no one's ever heard of, like who starts a cigar company. There really aren't any metrics that I know for that, I don't think. But yeah, in the software world, I mean, I do think that there are standard metrics. I mean, I think, in full disclosure, back in my early days, even at OpinionLab, like sales methodologies weren't really a thing. I know they existed at the time, but I don't think like little companies didn't really focus on them.
Mhm.
And I've learned, and I always looked at it as like, why do we need that? We'll figure it out. Well, like, we're selling a whole bunch of stuff. I'll just go hire more people and I'll train them myself, like walking headfirst into the definition of something that's not scalable. And I learned that, most of these sales methodologies, whatever one people happen to prefer, they exist for a reason. Like they work. Like, and it's really interesting. And there's a whole nother thread, I'm sure, but the whole AI thing and this whole I remember when I came to this company and I was just looking at the tech stack or whatever, people were asking, do you have Gong? And we didn't have Gong, and I had not used Gong in the past. And people were looked at me or like, what's wrong with you? Like you need to use that tool because it, analyzes calls. It gives you visibility into what the heck people are doing. But it's fascinating, like just using that as an example, but just AI in general, like you can upload or pick whatever sales methodology you want. And based on calls and based on emails, it will tell you where it thinks you are in that sales process. So I think this whole the idea of metrics and measuring is, despite the fact they're coming to take all of our jobs and rule the world, I think it might make sales a little bit better just because it does make it a little bit more manageable where everybody's playing in the same, singing from the same songbook and everybody's being measured against the same metrics. And the fact is you say that you've got the decision maker and they have budget, but the last 3 calls you're on, the person said something completely different. And the software can tell you that doesn't seem right. So I do
Right.
think it might be a little bit easier from a management perspective to add a little bit of automation.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, methodologies are near and dear to our heart. We have sort of our own framework itself, but
Right.
they're all very similar. But I think you touched on a really important thing. That, in my mind, the most important thing about having a methodology is having a common framework in which you can
Yeah.
discuss a deal. So you're all talking about the exact same things. When you said yes, they're ready to buy, that means something very specific,
Yeah.
not just their opinion about it. So, if nothing else, I think those are where it's really valuable. Where I seen it fall down, of course, is when people, again, they're filling out the boxes, right? Because they need to fill out the box to move to the next stage in Salesforce, right? And so they're
Right.
just throwing anything in there. The same thing they put in the last deal, and it's not real anymore, right? So that's, I think, the give and
Yeah.
take.
Yeah, one of our partners, I won't say who it was, but I remember, and it's a way, way, way bigger company than I've ever worked with. I would talk with, the partner manager liaison person, whatever, and they'd be asking a deal or whatever, and say, I would tell them where the deal truly is, a deal we're working together. And he'd say, well, I just looked it up in Salesforce and this person is projecting that it's going to close in 6 weeks. And I'm like, they haven't called us back in 6 weeks. What are you talking about? Like, they're very clearly, you don't, people, whether you have a methodology or not, but people aren't following it and aren't telling you the truth in your CRM. I'm like, wow, that's a mess. Anyways, yeah, it's having the common language and everyone agreeing on what it means. You can give your opinion, but kind of at the end of the day, there is or it isn't. You can tell me why you think something really is. We can debate that, but at least we're speaking the same language.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. And, as Matt said, we're kind of sweet on methodologies here. We've got our own, it's our own book and so forth. But at the end of the day, they all serve a similar purpose, which is to give everybody a common vocabulary and way of measuring process and progress or lack thereof, right? With respect to, have you really done this? But it requires that leadership not just pay lip service to that, right? Everyone needs to understand what that means, and they need to be able to you need to be living it. It should be effortless to be able to satisfy those things. But I know I've done it more than once. I've been in organizations where a sales leader will come in and there's a methodology or process that they're particularly sweet on, and they'll want the organization to adopt that. And it becomes pretty obvious early on that the methodology that they're trying to apply, they don't completely embrace. And now you get into this interesting circumstance where they're holding their people that are trying to execute to a false narrative.
Yeah.
There cannot be, I feel, an inconsistency between what the line in the sand that the leaders are setting about, here's what you must do, and this is why you must do it, and this is why it will help you. And if that's not passing the sniff test, that's got to be devastating. I mean, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, you've been a sales leader longer than
you're 100% spot on. I've been in those situations where people are like, hey, here's your new methodology. Go read this book, and we're going to have some tests and some workshops. And then you're like, well, I'm not even certain you understand that methodology, let alone holding me accountable to that methodology.
Yeah.
I'll take it even a step back further, but come back to this concept. But I find it's true. It's true in all organizations, I'm sure, but even more important in startups because they're so difficult. Everybody has to drink the Kool-Aid. Like, everybody has to believe you're doing what you're doing because you believe in it, and you expect other people to do it because you want them to believe in it too. All that. Like, even something as rudimentary as how you tell a story. Like, I have worked with lots and lots of people over the years that when they give presentations, it's like reporting the news. Like, it is just boring. Like, if you don't believe in what you're saying and don't have voice inflection and excitement and telling a compelling story, why the hell is somebody going to listen to you when you're just simply trying to sell something? Same holds true for all internal communications, right? Like, if people don't believe you're sold on it yourself and you truly believe it, they can disagree with you, but they're like, well, that guy for sure believes it. I think he's wrong, but he for sure believes it. If you're not sold in and truly passionate about, hey, this is why we're doing it. I'm not going to spend my whole time here trying to convince you why it's right, but I'm going to tell you why I think it's right. And I really need everybody else to get on board. You're right. The only way to get an organization on board and pulling in the same direction is if you truly believe in it. And you're right. I think people bring stuff on because they think they have to, or they may not really fully understand it, or may be angry that they have to try it, whatever the case might be. But yeah, people can smell that pretty quick, I think.
And that's got to erode. That's got to be like toxic. That's kryptonite to a leader, don't you think?
Yeah. You lose the room really quick. And people are like, why? Yeah. What everybody has their internal sales chats, that the leaders are not allowed to be part of. And, there's lots of back and forth going on about that, even during calls. And it's like, yeah, you get rather than what you hope to have as a leader of everybody saying, hey, this is hard, but we're really going to try. And we're kind of all pulling in the same direction. And honestly, the thing that I think probably the thing that attracts me most to startups is, if you're a lunatic enough to want to get involved in a startup, that means you're on board and you're you're all pulling in the same direction, and you're holding everybody else accountable, right? Like, I'm busting my ass. Like, why aren't you staying later? Why aren't you doing this work? Like, it's just this culture in this community. Yeah, if you lose that, whether you're a startup or a huge organization, and you're not passionate and believe in what it is that you do, yeah, you lose the room, and then you lose people pretty quick.
Yeah, the collective accountability, I think, is a
Yeah.
super important aspect
Mm.
to having any small startup or unit or something like that.
Yeah.
You have a sense of community, and you have a sense of you're all in this together, and you don't. And the motivation is you don't want to let the other people down because you like
Yeah.
working with them, and that erodes over time the larger the organization gets, and people are in
It
there for
does.
various reasons. I mean, a lot are just there for a paycheck, right, or whatever,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
it's okay, but it's
Which
like
is
it's a
okay.
different motivation at that point, right?
Yeah. It's, I think you're spot on. And I think that's, I didn't consciously make the decision, but just the way my brain was wired, it's like I'm a 0 to 10 or 0 to 20 guy because it's that. Like it's fun. It's interesting. People care. Like, and yeah, then you always have people that aren't fully on the bus, but eventually they kind of weed themselves out because other people don't want them to be around. It's that community of we're pulling together, we're building something that didn't previously exist, and we're going to make this damn thing successful. And that's contagious. Yeah, invariably. Godspeed if you're good and you get to the 10 or 20 and like you're on that rocket ship, that's awesome. But you do lose that. Like I do think you tend to lose it becomes more bureaucratic and administrative and just people, it just loses a little bit loses that community. I think that's why I've always naturally migrated to kind of the little guys that have a fighting chance.
Well, I tell you, Mark, we could be here all afternoon, and I would be more than happy to sit here and crack open a nice bottle of scotch, and we could all sit here and talk for like the next 2 or 3 hours. And next time you're in my neck of the woods, we will do exactly that. But
I like
we
that.
we do need to start bringing this one home. And we brought up a lot of really interesting points here and different perspectives, some of which I'd never really considered from the way that you brought them up. So to kind of summarize them, what would you say to a sales leader that is struggling right now? What would you say to them? Advice would you give them to try and make changes right now that are going to move the needle?
Yeah. Depending where they are in the process, and the size of, again, I look at I like the little guys in the world, but regardless, I guess, where they are in the process, it's that word process, right? It's
Mm.
if your team is struggling and, you're not getting the right um, results, if your team appears to be trying but the metrics aren't moving, or you fall into the trap that we talked about, the hey, everybody's dashboard looks great, there's a lot of busy work, but we're not closing deals. It's getting a methodology in place, is creating a process, whatever the process is, and getting people to get on board. Because to be honest, that it's the only way you get people back. If you had it at any point, it's the only way you get people back pulling in the same direction and being kind of that community of, hey, I agree. And then when you have sales meetings, I love salespeople. I mean, we're wild animals, right? But it's like, it's you when you're having a sales meeting and everybody's on the same level playing field, and then you put up the numbers for the week or the month, and whatever those numbers are, inherently salespeople look at it saying, that's bullshit. I don't want to be the one on the bottom. I want to be the one on the top.
Right.
Like, just that's the motivation. But you create that community. Yeah, if you're struggling and it's structure, right? If you're struggling and you're not able to get people to pull in the same direction, I would say best thing you can do is figure out whatever the structure it is that you need. And if you have structure and it's not working, maybe it's worth looking at a different methodology. They should buy your book and talk to you guys, I would guess.
They shouldn't. The best advice I've heard on this show in 40
See,
episodes. So,
and I'm not even getting paid. There you go.
no, I absolutely concur with what you're saying there. And I think you had hit upon it. And I think to paraphrase some of the things you had said earlier on, you need to be honest with yourself, because I know self be true. Know what
Yeah.
you're good at, know what you can do, and know whether or not you're really engaging in things that are moving the needle. And yet that requires, some being kind of self-critical to a
Yeah.
very large degree.
Starting and it's I'm sure a lot of people get there in a lot of different ways. I know for me personally, starting companies and failing companies makes you really, really humble. Like it makes you realize you don't know anything. Like being able to ask for advice, ask for help, and constantly self-assess. Am I doing the right thing? Like, I didn't have that earlier in my career. I just figured I'd
Mm.
muscle my way through and figure it out. But I think I've been humbled pretty significantly that I realize I don't know all the answers. If stuff's not working, it's probably my fault. Like I need to figure out how the heck to fix it. And if I don't know how to fix it, ask for help. Like it's okay to ask for help. Nobody knows everything.
That's absolutely true. And I know that you and I have had the conversation before where we've used the phrase, you learn more from your failures than you
Yeah.
do your successes. And sometimes a little failure is not a bad thing when you look at it in the long run.
Oh,
Mark,
at this point, I'm a PhD.
and you're still learning, which is the best part of the whole thing. And you like it, you keep coming back for more.
It's very true. It's very true.
Well, Mark, thank you so much for coming into the show today. Like I said, I would love to keep talking about all this. And I think we may have to have you back for a phase 2 on this one, quite frankly.
Would love to.
It was a lot of fun. I want to turn the floor over to you. What do you think here? Some final thoughts.
No, I really like the conversation and just kind of hearing the different stages of how, because I think that's a key thing is that not every person, not every organization needs to be the same approach.
Right.
And as things evolve and change, you
Mhm.
have to be able to evolve and change with that. And I think that's a
Yeah.
super valuable bit of advice there. So I really appreciate it and really enjoyed the conversation, Mark.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I do as well. That idea of being candid with yourself, making sure that the reason why you're not being successful is because of yourself. The team's not making it. Maybe it's time for you to think about whether or not you're contributing correctly, that being honest with yourself and then also being honest with the team and
Yeah.
making sure that you are bringing some to the table and trying to put that structure in to enable that growth that you really have mastered and you really do know how to bring that in. Very solid advice, my friend, as I was
Very
not
cool.
surprised to hear from you. Mark, if someone wanted to reach out to you to continue the conversation, if they heard something on the show today that they were like, I really need to go talk to this guy. He is my guru. I need to get with him. What would be the best way for them to reach out to you besides on the
Well,
Cigar Aficionado magazine?
yeah, right. We were in that once, actually. I would just say, yeah, probably LinkedIn is the easiest thing. Mark Krebs. I don't know what my LinkedIn profile is. I probably should know that. I'm terrible. But LinkedIn, Mark Krebs. That's probably Celebrus is a company that I work for. You'll find me.
Well, we'll put both of those in the description and information around the episodes. If someone wants to go and click on it and reach out to you, they'll be able to do so.
Awesome.
We are going to have to bring our episode to a close. I want to thank our guest, Mark Krebs, for coming onto the call today. And obviously also thank my partner, Matt Long. Matt, thank you so much for being here again and incredible questions as always, sir. But also want to thank you folks for coming in and spend a little bit of your time with us. Let us know what you think. Take a moment and give us some feedback. What did we cover that you liked? What were some things you would have liked to have seen us cover, or maybe go and cover on a follow-up show? Leave a comment in whatever platform it is you're listening to us on. And please like, follow, and subscribe. Costs you nothing, but really, really helps out the show. But for us here at Software Sales Simplified Move to Success, we want to wish you a very good day. And thank you very much for coming and spending a little bit of time with us. We'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.